Cold outreach is no different. If you have a list of 50, there's two things that are true. The first is it's probably true that at 50 or less, that audience is very similar, probably the same job title, probably the same industry. The second is you can eyeball 50 emails. So before they go out, whether you're using a template or whether you're using AI to tweak your emails, you can look at every single one of them and make sure they're all still making sense. What we have seen is the word count in the email body has changed. So it used to be like right around 100 to 120 words, and you'd see a massive drop in the numbers. If there's one word in the subject line, which I don't know why you would do that, but like somebody clearly did, it had a 62.9% open rate. What you say matters more than the number of words you say it in. The reality is the people who have just LinkedIn data have great coverage. But what happens when LinkedIn doesn't quite give you what you need? That's one of the reasons why we focus on more than 60% of our data coming from sources other than LinkedIn. I think is going to be a big thing that leads to success in 2026.
Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is the CEO of Hunter.io, a sales and marketing tool that we all know and love. We're excited to be joined today by Matt Tharp. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Adam. Good to be here.
Yeah, well, hey, we're excited to dive into everything. We got a lot to cover. Adam, what are 3 things that people will learn if they stick around until the end of the show today?
Okay, the first thing you're going to learn is you'll learn the math behind why shrinking your target list to under 50 recipients is a secret to closing 50 plus customers in under 3 months. Number 2, we'll discuss how to use high intent signals to ensure your email hits the inbox exactly when the prospect's looking for an answer. And number 3, you'll get the framework for writing 1-sentence industry hooks that bypass the spam filter in a prospect's brain to get the immediate tell me more response.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. I feel like that last point too, this spam filter in our brains, like I've said it on this show before, I think I am a top 1% in the world at scanning the subject lines and the inbox preview text and marking as read. I think I'm elite at it. I think a lot of us have gotten really good at it. But that's why Matt's here to tell us kind of all the different tactics that we can use to be more creative, to be more personal, to give more value. And Matt, before we dive into it, a lot of people here are probably familiar with Hunter. I've used it. I know Adam's used it. But for folks who haven't, can you tell us a little bit about Hunter.io, what it is, who it helps?
Yeah, thanks. Hopefully everybody attending has at least heard of Hunter. Many of us, including myself, started trying to build our pipeline for our first startup or our second startup using Hunter. Hunter's kind of an OG in the outreach space. Started with one of the best ways to get email addresses on the internet. And this was, I want to say it was like an early product hunt launch success. We had a Google extension early on and just like really focused on trying to make email outreach as accessible to people as possible. And we've just continued to build on that mission. We're, I think, now fully an all-in-one platform for cold outreach and continue to have, one of the best unique data sets in the industry. Everybody, I think, tries to, there's benchmarks on Play now. And it's interesting because what Play will do is Play will use like a corpus of LinkedIn data to compare everybody's data to see who has the best coverage. And the reality is the people who have just LinkedIn data have great coverage. But what happens when LinkedIn doesn't quite give you what you need? That's one of the reasons why we focus on more than 60% of our data coming from sources other than LinkedIn. And so, yeah, Hunter's great. Look, we're constantly trying to do our best to make this process as easy as possible for businesses of any size, and work with, I think, just a lot of great companies in the space, and partnerships and integrations with just about everybody.
Amazing.
I think 0% of our B2B data is outside of LinkedIn. So you're pretty much way ahead of, if I were to go make a contact database app right now, you would be curb stomping us. So that is awesome.
I mean, the LinkedIn data set's great, right? But I think what happens is you end up chasing, and we see this, like I read this on Reddit a lot where folks will post that like week by week they're trying out different providers and often talking about similar results. I'm like, well, you're going from sort of the same data set but a different provider to each one. And so yeah, I think our topic today is going to cover this a bit, but I think trying to encourage people to extend their data sets more, I think is going to be a big thing that leads to success in 2026. Not just because
Awesome.
of us, but in general.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, I feel like Hunter has been one of those platforms that like I've heard about. I remember Diana, who's Adam's CRO, maybe like 8 years ago. She was like, you got to use Hunter. Like, this is literally how we're making everything work. And they were, I mean, insane growth trajectory. I started using it. It was great. I also, before we dive into the first question, I just want to give you a shout out. I am obsessed with positioning and people positioning their products and articulating it in a very clear and concise way. In 4 words, you nailed exactly what Hunter does. And obviously, like the text below and everything like helps elaborate, but like this is so good. Like connect with any professional is just a amazing hero statement. I gotta give you kudos to that because those things look really easy to write, but like it's one of the hardest things is to summarize this big thing that you probably articulated to people over hours long dinners, and then you're summarizing it forward. I just think that's
Yeah, it's easy to talk about what we do in ample words. It's hard to boil it down, but yeah, thanks. I will share that with the team. I appreciate the kudos, Pete.
I love it. All right, well, let's get into it. So I heard you recently started ramping up your own outbound at Hunter. So I heard something like about 50 customers closed just from cold email in the past few months. So I'm just curious, like you have a amazing bird's eye view of outreach, of metrics, of success, as we've sort of have at our B2B. So I'm curious, like, is your success a bit of an anomaly, or is there like a big resurgence with kind of the new tools that we have? We have things like Clay now. We have the ability to personalize more than we have before. We have the ability for AI to do some of our research. Is there, I guess, let me summarize my question a little better. Is there like a difference now between those who like get it and those who don't? Or do you feel like you had some sort of unique variables that allowed you to find success that was quite frankly, like usually beyond what most people find?
Well, most people. This is always hard, right? Creating generalizations about things like this. Look, the majority of people, look, the sexy thing about our space is the idea that you can automate sales pipeline generation. I think that attracts everybody. I think the appeal is obvious. And moreover, the more you can automate, the more you can send, seemingly the better. And I think for the last couple of years, I forget what the proper term, if it's golden age or gilded age, whatever the one is right before depression, I feel like is very likely the apropos comparison. But I think, yeah, I think have gone through a gilded age of cold outreach because there was a period over the last couple of years where the scalability problem was largely solved and figured out with deliverability. And so it encouraged a lot of, I think, volume to be generated. Now, there was also some sophistication in terms of community building, where I think people who were attracted to this space and attracted to this opportunity were also good at sharing information, sharing what worked. And so I think this was something that was often kept internally in corporations before. And now we're finding it was a bit more democratized. And I think all these things came together at once, which was great. It proved the model. I think it proved what was possible. It proved that this is just a channel, not that it was some unique snowflake unicorn opportunity. And so what I think happened was we got to see a massive amount of experimentation at scale in a short period of time to sort of prove out this use case and this channel. And I think that happened. Now, as is true with everything, Google gets more sophisticated and decides, oh, we're going to make inbox filtering better. And then the next thing you know, they're pumping Gemini into Gmail. Although that hasn't been fully rolled out, we can imagine where this is going, right? And so I think largely in response to the scalability problem being solved, we're now seeing what comes after that, which is how do we get a handle on our inboxes, and that's going to fall to the inbox providers. That's falling to email providers like Google and Microsoft, but even all the applications, like just I use Superhuman. Superhuman's gotten better and better about tagging things and helping me identify what's not necessarily spam, but maybe deserving of a marketing tag or something. So like all that is getting better. That doesn't silence this as a channel. This doesn't change, the math. What it does is it says the old way probably isn't going to work as well. And it's time for everybody to pivot and figure that out. And I think that happens in every sort of tech ecosystem where we reach a bit of an equilibrium. At that point, you sort of go into the next evolution of what it is. I think we're just going into that now. I don't know if it's more than that, really, Pete.
That's fair, man. I can't think of a single marketing channel that fell into this situation where everybody who was running their first experiments or going to test that channel started doing it at scale instead of testing in a small batch. And it is the most bizarre thing. People are like, okay, now I'm starting my startup. Got 250,000 contacts. I have 100 inboxes loaded up. Let's blast them with my terrible offer. And I just think it's the most bizarre. I'm just fascinated by it because it's like so many companies find traction there. Today, the ones that find the most traction, it seems, are ones that are running micro lists, so small pockets of people that have some sort of common variable, whether that's industry, a problem, and then just doing deeper research. Is that kind of a tactic that you guys use as well? Like, were you going kind of smaller lists as you've gone out with your own cold outreach?
So we started doing primary research on all of our data late 2003 or 2023. So 2023, we started looking at the data and trying to analyze all the different variables that contributed to higher response rates, higher open rates, higher conversion rates, et cetera. And one of the things that was true a couple of years ago in our first bit of research and has only gotten more true is that smaller audience sizes perform better. You can just see the drop off in the data when you go past 50 and when you go past like 100. And it's dramatic. And so the question we started to ask is, okay, like the data is pretty definitive there. What does it mean? Why? Why do smaller lists contribute? Because theoretically, you're talking about the exact same email that's being sent, the same people involved, and the only difference is the size of the audience. So what does that change? Our best hypothesis, and actually looking at some of the data, although anecdotal, it clarifies this. And it's like, as the smaller the list gets, the more alike the recipients are, and the easier it is to create a relevant message to each of them. And honestly, I don't think it's any more sophisticated than that. It's like anything. If you're going to do a presentation or a speech, you can make it really, really personal if you're doing it for 3 people or 1 person. And the bigger that audience gets, the less and less personal that is likely going to be. Cold outreach is no different. If you have a list of 50, there's 2 things that are true at 50 and below that I don't think are true above that. The first is it's probably true that at 50 or less, that audience is very similar. It's probably the same job title, probably the same region, probably the same industry. And that allows you to communicate with them similarly. The second is you can eyeball 50 emails, right? So before they go out, whether you're using a template or whether you're using AI to tweak your emails, you can look at every single one of them and make sure they're all still making sense. If you're sending 10,000 emails, you absolutely can't do that. I actually think, like, I won't speak for everybody, but my human brain starts to sort of kind of zone out at about 75 emails. So like I can get through 50 and a couple of breaks in there, but like if you look at a longer list than that, for me, I'm like, I'm not going to look at all this. It's just too much. And I know it sounds obvious or simple, but I think it's those 2 things are enabled with small lists, and that makes sure the quality is there. And I'm sure there's other little things, but I think that's the heart of it.
That I completely agree. Like the unfortunate part too is like when you have, let's say you have a list of 10,000 people. Well, a lot of them are going to be either not a fit, not in market, whatever the case might be. So now you're kind of burning calories. And in this case, in the email game, it would be like deliverability, kind of There's different stuff being burned. But now you're treating the good people the same as the bad people. And now you're sending them more generic stuff. You're not really caring as much about those specific messages. And I think too, for like, there's a lot of this audience is more on the startup side here. We've got 226 now at 22 after the hour. And the early stage growth, early stage founders. We have some people who are above that, but I think a lot of times founders, marketers at startups will get very caught up on the growth trajectory in the spreadsheet. You guys are both CEOs. I know you got your growth spreadsheets. I've seen them, right? They're and nothing works like it does in the spreadsheet. That's the annoying part, right? But you're like, okay, if this worked at this scale, we sent out 50 emails, we got 2 customers. So let's send out 5,000 and then we should get 200, like you just do that math upwards that way, but it never works that way. And I think inevitably, just scaling down, focus on, like, if you have 2 customers, you shouldn't be worried about getting your next 100. You should be worried about getting your 3rd customer. You know what I mean? Like, kind of more direct goals there. So, I'm curious about this research component because this is, when GPT came out, I want to say it was fall of 2022 ish. I'm thinking.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, something like that. And the first personalized emails we all saw were like, "Hey Pete, saw you went to Penn State. Like, I heard the spring fun run is a blast." I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And like, that means nothing to me. Like, all you've told me is that you're about to sell me something. So I'm curious if you guys have used anybody or maybe have, users of Hunter that have really excelled at the AI research. Is that something that is like a big part of your motion or motions of folks that you guys are close to?
For us, yeah, I think we're trying to build more and more of this into the product to make it easy for everybody. And I think it's still a little challenging, right? First off, if this is your first campaign or your second campaign, just pump the brakes, get the basics right. Make sure you're using your first few of these to test messaging. Like, that's the other thing. You mentioned this, Pete, and this one used to drive me crazy, is people would come in and they were expecting to send 20, 30,000 emails like in the first month for their first ever cold outreach. I'm like, first off, you should run 3, 4, 5 different experiments to try to dial in what messaging works first, before you start scaling it up. And I think there was a lot of that, and I think we're getting better. But yeah, I think that's like one of the challenges, is just trying to get people to slow down a little bit, not race to the end, not think that that any message is going to work, but figure out, how do you figure out how to dial in your audience right? How do you get the data for that right? And then how do you get the copy to a point where it makes sense to go to scale? And by scale, that means, like, for that audience, you can use some deviation on that message on an ongoing basis, not that exact message to everybody else in every other category. I think I don't know about you guys, but I feel like one of the pieces that doesn't get talked about enough in our space is just segmentation. Just having a little bit of rigor and understanding about the right ways to do segmentation. And that, I think, gets glazed over because it's harder to talk about. Like, it's really easy to tell people that if you do these 5 tricks, you'll get $1 million in pipeline in 30 days. It's a lot harder to say, hey, you should really spend some time being thoughtful about your segmentation and, dialing in this and this. Like, that's a harder sell, frankly.
It's funny because, like, and I see this too with like clients that I work with, where they're some will be very obsessed with, not all, some will be very obsessed with the amount of emails that are going out, the amount of dollars behind ad spend, but not focusing on something that I think is more important, which is like, 1, testing copy, and 2, segmentation. Because it's like, there's nothing sexy about chopping up a spreadsheet for 5 hours, and I can't really, like, it doesn't show up on the page as well as, hey, we're sending out 10,000 emails, whatever, a month. But ultimately, like, those sort of vanityless tasks, and I think like necessary setup infrastructure is really what makes or breaks this thing. Which leads us to copy. We talk a lot about copy here. I want to read a couple comments though that are from the audience. Sanjay says, I hope this email finds you well. That was literally in the question. I have it like I didn't say it, but it's literally in my written question on my run a show here. So yeah, Sanjay nailed that. Chad says, if you get 2 out of 50, so we have a list of 50 and we get 2, let's say we get 2 appointments. I would think your next step would be to find the next 50 that look like the 2 that converted. That's fair. I mean, just keep rolling, keep getting more and more micro lists
until you get to diminishing returns. Yeah, go with what works and keep going with what works until you reach a point where it makes sense to go beyond that. That's another thing I do see is people seem to be in a hurry to get away from something when it works, to try to diversify. And I'm like, guys, that's probably the wrong thing to do early. Like, double down on every success until it doesn't make sense anymore. That's not 5. That's like 1,000 or 10,000. It's a much different scale.
Yeah, 100%. We also have some comments with a couple people have asked about video outreach. I'm curious if you or users of Hunter have experimented with that. There's services like OneMob or SendSpark and a bunch of others that allow you to set like embed a video into either a LinkedIn message, which is cool because the thumbnail pops up, and we don't usually get many of those. Is that something that you've experimented with or seen others? We haven't talked about this before, so maybe you just haven't, which is okay.
We haven't experimented with it internally. I've received some that I thought were really good. I've also seen them done pretty poorly, so it's really not that different from any other tactic right now in that regard. But I would say look, there's 2 challenges. One is there's deliverability impact. Anytime you add anything, video, link, content, PDF, whatever it is, there is some deliverability impact by that. The more, the worse deliverability impact. So what we have found is that scaling back things like links, documents, all have a positive impact. And so the data suggests that doing less of that is better. That said, if you're targeting SaaS users and you have an ability to do like a quick little GIF video demo of your product to give them some visible support for what you're saying in your pitch, I like those personally. I tend to see that open rates on those is pretty good. But I don't think there's enough data in terms of people doing it for me to say definitively that like, yeah, it's a good idea or a bad idea yet. I think it's super interesting, but I'd be really selective because of the deliverability impact.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's I've found myself over the years spending the lift of doing something like this is also, it's like the idea of it is so sexy. And then you start down this path of like, well, how am I going to do it? And then you have this idea in your head that you're going to do it one way. And then 2 weeks later, you still haven't sent a video message. And like, it's nothing like what you thought. And the lift was huge. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. Unless the data were super clear that like, this is the way to do this. I'm probably just, my gut is always like as clear and concise as possible. Like conversational, like do anything you can to make it not sound like marketing speak or sales speak. And then, like any direct response marketing, list, offer, offer, creative, right? Like, the list 100%. Is the segment. The offer is, how clearly you are articulating your solution to this pain that this audience presumably has. And then the creative is like, how you're setting that all up, right? Like the copy, basically.
I totally agree with that, Adam. There was in fact, like, this isn't new. I think that there's a lot of times where people come to cold outreach and think, oh, if I don't know what's happening right now, I'm not caught up. I'm not going to be successful because I don't know the latest and greatest. And we were putting together quotes for a piece of content, and I went back and reread the Ogilvy on advertising. And there's a whole chapter in that book that might as well be a whole pitch on cold outreach. He's basically saying direct advertising has always been my ace in the hole. And it was interesting to read through that because you've got this massive book on advertising, and the chapter on direct outreach is the one where he's like, at the end of the day, this is the thing that moves the needle. Like, you can do all these other things and you have to do it. You got to put the spend behind it and all of that. But he's like, but when we really, really needed to make an impact, direct outreach was always our thing. And they found, because they could get leverage on that because they had access and they knew it better than other people did. And now you have products like Hunter and RB2B, and they kind of take a lot of those concepts and make those super accessible to people. You can still make it leverage. That's what's crazy. This has been around forever, and yet we get tricked into technology, tricked by technology into thinking that this is like totally new. It's not. It's just better tools to do the same job. And that's my favorite thing at Hunter is actually, like, even if you look at the product where it was 10 years ago, which is crazy to say, we've been doing this for 10 years. If you look at where the product was focused 10 years ago and where it is today, it's very clearly, it's just, how do we continue to make the entire journey of doing cold outreach easier for more people? The fundamentals are the same. We can even add features that we probably couldn't have 10 years ago. We just have to make sure that you don't have to be super sophisticated to take advantage of it. And I think that's the fun product challenge for us, is how do we keep doing that? As users get more sophisticated and as the techniques get more sophisticated, how do we still make that something that a small business or an entrepreneur or a first-time founder can just like pick up and go, oh, okay, cool. I just defined my TAM and now I also have an outreach list I can just start acting on. Like, that's something you couldn't have done 10 years ago, which you can now, which is super cool.
I always really like when I first started using Hunter, I think we were Zoom Info customers at that time, if not, whatever, DMB, depending on how long ago it was. But yeah, I think it was Zoom Info. And the beautiful thing was Hunter did not replace. Oh, there it is. Okay. I was going to ask. Let me drop it.
Somebody in the comments asked, and although I had to get the focus to turn on, just make it exactly the same distance as my face. There we go. It's Ogilvy on advertising. It's just that. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's perfect. Let me drop that Amazon link in for everybody, because we love book recommendations on here. I have not read this one, so that's going in my part.
Don't let me oversell it. It is one chapter. Like, don't think that this is like the cold outreach Bible or anything.
Yeah. Hey, fair enough. I also love
it's the advertising Bible, to be fair.
It is. It is indeed. Yes. Somebody said read it all 100%.
Yeah.
I also like the Claude C. Hopkins one, Scientific Advertising or My Life in Advertising. Yeah, those two. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating when you read these books from completely different eras and realize that the principles are all completely the same.
Yeah.
That one I think was written in like the 20s.
Yeah.
Like, it was written like right before the Great Depression or something like that.
Great.
And it's just like, I ended up learning every one of those lessons the hard way in my experience. He's like got a whole chapter on just like the demonstration, and like, I just remember like trying to sell our first SaaS startup, and some guy shows up and he's like, by the way, you should really be doing a demo for this. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, just some fucking slides that like tell people what it is. I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And then sure enough,
revolutionary idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same stuff, just repackaged. But I before we go, I want to get in the copy offer. Every time we talk about cold outreach here, that is always, that's the spear. It's like, what the heck are you offering these people? Like, what do you have to give them? So I want to talk about that. Before we jump into that, I just want to put a cap on the link stuff. Where do you stand on open tracking these days? I'll give you a little preface, because I'm a little bit of a skeptic. I feel like the smart leads of the world are telling us not to open track. It might hurt deliverability, but then how the heck do I know how anything is working? I run it with some clients at a smaller, we do a handful of inboxes, maybe 35 emails a day, like pretty small scale stuff, targeted lists, all with open tracking. I haven't seen a decline. What have you seen? I'm curious. Like, is that something that you can still do reliably without like accelerating your journey to the spam box, or what do you feel about that?
I love that you asked this question. Not like we didn't preface this, but like, here's why. There's so much anecdotal information about our space shared. Everybody has like, oh, here's a thing I did, right? Or I tried a couple campaigns and I didn't see any real impact. And so there's so much of that. And like, who's to say you're wrong? You probably did run 2 campaigns. They were similar. Who cares, right? Like that was great, but that's not definitive. We have 4 million users of Hunter. That gives us visibility to a massive amount of data, and it allows us to do primary research on not what do we think from our campaigns, but what does the data say? If you don't include, I want to get the data right exactly. If you don't include open tracking, it's a 68% higher reply rate. So the reply rates are around 7.4% without open tracking versus 4.4 with. So if you normalize for everything else, statistically, that's a pretty substantial difference. We're not talking about margins here. I mean, that's a pretty big difference.
And is that a function of deliverability, better deliverability?
I mean, it would have to be because
right?
the only thing that could impact would be your ability to get into the inbox. If you have open tracking or not, nobody's going to know except the inbox.
Right. That's what I'm thinking. So let's hypothesize an ideal situation for the audience here. My best read on this would be to do your low level sample testing with the open tracking on to understand, because sometimes you'll have like a subject line or preview text that literally performs like 2 to 3x what others will. Is there a world where like you test that at a small scale, figure out sort of that, the winners and the losers, and then once you have a winner, shut off the open tracking and then and then maybe amp up volume and let that ride?
Yeah, I can't nod hard enough at that. That's absolutely. Not enough early experimentation is done just to figure out what messaging moves the needle. And especially if you're doing the right thing and you're bringing those list sizes down, it's harder to get those experiments at statistical significance. So you have to do a couple of them to validate it. But yeah, the first thing you should be doing is making sure you're getting the best out of your messaging before you scale it up. And I've never seen any amount of that work not pay off.
It's all messaging.
Okay, Irie's asking, what's the best sample size for a go, no go on messaging? Great next question. Thank you,
Yeah. Do you have an answer for this, Adam? I have a non-mathematical answer for this.
No, I'm curious about yours. What's your number?
I try to get to 1,000. I try to get to at least 1,000 touch points before I really consider something tested. That's pretty low, but I think that gives you enough information to know whether or not it makes sense or not, right? To know if you've got directional data there. And so that also, if you're keeping your list size to like 50 to 100, that gives you anywhere from 10 to upwards of 20 experiments that you can run, which really allow you to validate different variables. That's the other problem, is if you're doing smaller list sizes, it's hard to test multiple specific variables and have any statistical significance. And so, yeah, I try to do at least 1,000 before fully committing. But I don't know that that's scientific.
I would also add it's usually smaller than people think. Like if I'm testing like meta ads, I mean, I've found statistical significance by running like literally $3 a day for like a week. I mean, at that point, then you're basically trying to find the ceiling. Like that's just to find a winner from a messaging and creative standpoint. And then from there, you need to find your ceiling, which is a completely different thing because that does not scale in a nice linear fashion.
The difference with ads, though, is you're dealing with a much different data infrastructure and much better algorithms. Email is tougher because you have to be the computer. And so it just makes it a little bit harder than ads in that respect.
Fair. I like your 1,000 number, though. I think that's probably smaller than what a lot of the audience would think. And it's I think it's very reasonable, especially with these micro lists. Like that's great. Okay, let's talk copy. So I'm sure, well, we've seen this many times at our B2B to the point where in the early days, our onboarding calls became marketing consultations. And it was because people would see, in the early days, I'm talking like March 2024, when people would see like, oh, I can identify who's on my website now. Like, great, that's what I've been missing. Like now I can finally reach out to the right people. They're going to book an appointment and life is going to be great from here on out. And, where we would hop on these calls and it'd be like, okay, great. What are you sending them? And it would just be this like super uncompelling, confusing, long kind of offer, kind of not, more of just like a description of what they did. So I guess I want to dive into copy. I'm curious if you have sort of some principles or some, kind of mental guidelines that you follow when it comes to sending out your own copy, or it doesn't even have to be email necessarily, just like in general, pitching your offer. What makes a compelling offer? You've been doing this for 10 years and you keep growing. So you certainly know how to make a compelling offer. So I'm curious your thoughts there.
Well, we're a bit introverted, so I'm not sure I would hang our hat on that as much as we tend to be very literal and very direct and very matter of fact, which certainly appeals to a certain segment of the market for sure. And we like it because then we don't feel like we're saying anything that we can't stand behind. But this is hard because there's not. So when we first did this research a couple of years ago, there was a clear line in the number of words in an email and a number of words in a subject line that mattered. And what we have seen is the word count in the email body has changed. There's not as much of a drop off in word count as there once was. It used to be like right around 100 to 120 words, and you'd see a massive drop in the numbers in terms of like reply rate. Recently, it's not that consistent. And so, like, for example, we looked at word count in the subject lines. And I wish I could just show you this, it's easier, but like, if there's one word in the subject line, which I don't know why you would do that, but like somebody clearly did, it had a 62.9% open rate. Not bad. That's like up in the sort of top 5 percentile of what we saw as good, consistent open rates. But if you did 2 words, it drops to 50, like straight up 50. Massive decrease. 3 words, 59. And then it goes back into the 60s for a couple words, and then it drops back down. So it's like all over the place. I have not yet figured out exactly what that means about the sweet spot, except that it's just not as important, right? Like probably what I think is becoming true is what you say matters more than the number of words you say it in. What changes that dramatically is the number of personalization variables in the subject line. And since most people do use that in the subject line, we have good data around that. And there's a big difference between 1 or 0 and like 2 to 4. 2 and 3 are really solid. 2 is the sweet spot. 4 starts to drop off pretty dramatically. So you can overdo it. And then I think what ends up happening is we've all seen this, the readability breaks when you try to scale that at all. 4 variables is too many to get right for that many people. And so I think it's a lot of that. I think it's 2 variables allows it to be personal. What was the line you used? Credibly specific. I liked that. And I think 2 variables allows you to do that, and any more than that or less than that starts to break. You can't, if it's less than that, you can't tell it's actually personalized. If it's more than that, inevitably some percentage of them turn into gibberish, and that doesn't work either. So
can we look at this email that I got that like stuck with me as a good email and just tear it down real quick?
yeah.
And by the way, I know this guy, so I probably opened it because I recognized his name. But then I remember thinking it was clearly written, but like I'm looking at it again, and this email touches a lot of what you're talking about. So
Nice.
I'm gonna just share. Let's see. All right, can everybody see my Gmail?
Yep.
Okay. So this is Kenan. He owns icon.com. And I know that this is like the AI, the AI ad maker. It's like kind of you can like get an influencer to record a video, and then you can give it 100 AI hooks, bodies, and closes, and then it sticks them all in Meta and finds the winner. At least that's what it's supposed to do.
Okay.
Twitter disagrees that that's what it actually does. So anyway, all right, let's take the subject line. Quick retention question. So, RB2B is one of my businesses. The other one's called retention.com. If it weren't, I would like your opinion on this, but like, if it weren't Kenan that wrote this, I feel like that's a sales email.
Yeah.
If
I see quick hunter question, unless it's somebody I know it's sales. Yeah.
Yeah. But that is personalized on a variable. What might I have liked to see? I mean, so he bought a huge domain. He says he paid $12 million for it, but icon.com. But I think it was one of these things where it was like, I'll pay you $12 million when the company gets acquired. And if it goes to shit, I'll just give you back the domain. That's my hypothesis. Because he doesn't have $12 million. and he didn't just like take, all of the round from Andreessen Horowitz or whatever and like give it to this guy. So, anyway, I might have preferred retention.com meet icon.com or something. You know what I mean? Like, just, it's a sales demo, but it's not. I feel like quick retention question is trying to trick me or something.
But it did.
But, okay, so let's move down a little bit. I actually think this is interesting. It's like personalization around me not testing in my meta ads. Fair.
Yeah.
That's like a pretty good first line, I think.
Are you testing any meta ads, or was that accurate?
I mean, I'm running some retargeting ads, but there's certainly no, like, I know that he could probably be a little bit clearer on that articulation. I noticed you're not running any A/B tests in Meta or something like that. If he can even see that, which
that's the thing. Yeah, it's like, how clear is the data for him to be that confident in that statement? But anyway,
totally, yeah.
You like the word testing too, because it kind of lets him off the hook there. It's like, well, we've been running the same ads for a year. I think there's something about that. I also like the Adam exclamation point. It's just a little, I don't know, something about that.
Kind of personal, and you don't see it. It's just different. I think the key is like
it pattern breaks. It's a pattern breaker.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
The pattern break is so important. So I like this next sentence, and I put a little mental note. It's like he gives social proof without actually the burden of providing credible brands. It's like, this past year, I've worked with 22 B2B SaaS companies, a lot like retention, pairing AI with human creators to make winning ads at half the time and no cost. That was a pretty good sentence. I don't know. Pete, any thoughts there?
I mean, it's a great, I'm curious Matt's thoughts. I look at that. I think that's probably a variable that was input there, like retention in their database. The industry is B2B SaaS. But yeah, I mean, it's like, because then now he doesn't have to also insert companies, because there's probably other emails that are going out with different industries there. And then it's just a lot like, and then company name. And he did a little bit of trend jacking with the AI and human creators. Half the time it costs.
That's just classic.
I like that sentence. Yeah.
That's the end of it. Half the time it costs. That's like great taste, less filling, right? Like, that's like the ultimate.
Yeah, exactly.
Ultimately, you get more and less.
Let me just take the risk away. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then this sentence, I think, is pretty strong CTA here. We now run this playbook enough times to make it risk-free. With the fresh year ahead, I'd love to set up retention with the money. By the way, I'd not capitalize. Love to set up retention with a money back pilot month. If our Jan ads don't convert, we'll send every dollar back. Would it make sense to send over more details?
It's interesting because there's actually no specificity behind what convert and risk-free mean. Kind of. He just kind of validates it by saying we'll send every dollar back, but it's like, okay, does that mean like if one person clicks the landing page, that's a conversion? Like, do you have to collect revenue from them? I think it's a creative way to de-risk the reader without tying themselves to some outcome before they've even gone in and talked to you. But I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of letting themselves off the hook, but allowing themselves to de-risk, add the illusion of social proof. Yeah, I think that's interesting. I'm curious.
Don't go away from this one. I want to comment on this one. So first off, I think the subject line's the weakest part.
Yeah.
I think the rest of the email is like really good for the reasons we called out. There's a pattern break in the beginning. My favorite thing is like if you just really take a step back even further, the first sentence is pain identification.
Yeah.
Hey, I know that if I'm sending you this email, you are likely someone that cares about whether or not you're learning from meta ads or you're getting value out of meta ads, right? So, like, I'm going to put my finger on likely you wish you could be doing more with meta ads. I think most executives or people in startups are probably wondering if they're getting enough value out of their ads. So, it's kind of like a safety, but it focuses on the pain. So now I, as the reader, know exactly what pain you're going to talk to me about. It's in one sentence. The second sentence or second paragraph is the sort of soft social proof. I agree. You're not naming any names, but also if you're doing your list sizes right, this is a great list size component. I don't need a bunch of variables in this sentence if the list size is good. Because if I've got a well-targeted list, B2B SaaS companies doesn't have to be a variable, but retention could. And so then you're not over variabilizing things and you know that the message makes sense. And if you over variabilize, one of the things that happens is this sentence will start to deviate and you end up getting these sentences that are very clearly AI sounding or templatey sounding. And so like I think that this is a good version of, okay, I've identified your pain. Let me give you some social proof that this is what I do. And then lastly, let me take away any risk, right? Like let me just objection handle right here. I promise you, this is going to work. And then there's not a hard close. It's a, should I send you more information? That last little bit is a great way to avoid having to try to include a video in your first email, having to try to include too much content or a PDF or a link to the website, right? Like you can dial way back the number of inserts into your outreach if you use that last sentence, which is a bit of a qualifier about whether or not the follow-ups could include something. Yeah, I think it's really solid. If you just take the same pattern and just rewrite it for a different industry and a different kind of a constituent, like I think you get like this is a really good pattern to just kind of rinse and repeat and modify for each different target list.
Yeah, we're doing our own outbounds now, and man, it's just surprisingly annoying to get it all set up like and like going is just amazing. But I think I'm gonna add this pattern as a variant on both sides, like for the Shopify side and the B2B side. Yeah, I think it's good. Look, Harshit asks, or Harshit gave us a slightly more cleaned up version of that copy, which I'm fine with either one of them. It's like almost like the more cleaned up, more precise version is a bit less personal in some way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but at the same time, it like I'm also a huge fan of just being like, this is exactly the problem we're solving for you in as few words as humanly possible. Like,
Yeah.
that is a powerful email, however you do it. And then we have a guy who's kind of helping us with a bunch of, activation stuff at RB2B, and we're trying to figure out if we can run ads and make them work because they don't work right now. And he had, we were talking about writing emails to people, not just in cold outbound, just like, we're like building a completely new system in the Shopify space. And we're trying to get our existing customers excited about it. And, you look at some of these emails that are being sent, and it's like, I wouldn't answer that. I wouldn't answer that.
Yeah.
And it's like, and his thing was like, whenever you're sending an email for any purpose, the first thing you should be thinking when you're writing it is what is in it for that person who's reading it. Literally, just like what's in it for me. And then there's like this other element of like the so what it's
So
kind of
what?
related.
Yeah.
It's just like make me drop everything that I am doing to write you back and pursue this opportunity. Like that's the bar,
Let me soften that a little bit. Let me challenge that. Because here's the thing. These are sales emails. However, you're not always going to get the timing right. I actually think that people who try to optimize too much of their campaign around timing are setting themselves up to fail. the timing is always going to be a challenge. And so because of that, knowing that you are going to be wrong about the timing more than you're going to be right, you've got to think about the email as a brand touch point that is going to give you positive brand impression later. And an example for this is if you get the timing wrong, what you really want is for 3 months later for somebody to go, actually, somebody emailed me about this. And I remember when I read it, I thought, oh, I'm not ready for that, but that might be now. And with Gemini being added to Gmail, if you think that this is actually a detriment, it's actually a better thing. Because if you put value in the emails that you're sending, not because you necessarily are going to push for the close, but because you want to make sure that you're associating yourself with value here around this concept and this pain point, then later, when you do have all these AI assistants in your email and you say, hey, who was it that emailed me about this problem 3 months ago? You're way more likely to find it with AI in your inbox than you did without. And so, like, I think the value of cold outreach as a brand touch point that can actually get recalled gets higher. And it's worth really considering that in your outreach. And if you have to sometimes soften it just a bit, I actually think that that's probably going to pay off longer term. It may not be the best way to drive maximum pipeline off the first email every time, but I think in terms of recall and your ability to get, not necessarily a call back, but somebody pulling that up from a couple months ago. Rob seems to disagree with me on this, but I think, look, I've done it. I've talked to people that have done it, and I've had people reach out to me from an old cold email saying, because this email was so valuable, I didn't delete it. And even though I didn't reply, I looked for it later. And they came back, like, I want to say it was probably closer to like 2 months than 3 months, but still not unreasonable.
Well, that's probably a great place to wrap it, since it's 2 minutes to the hour. By the way, we had fantastic retention in this show, which means
Nice.
the content was great. We only dropped about 10% from the peak, if I'm looking at this correctly. Yeah. So thank you for that, Matt. I mean, everybody always wants to talk about outbound, and you are as qualified as anybody with the data that you guys have to give us knowledge that we can go use in furthering our craft as founders. So we really appreciate it, man.
I'm happy to be able to come and share it. We don't just research for ourselves. We bake it into our product, and we try to share it publicly and make it free for everybody to be able to read and access this, whether you're on our platform or not. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and share it. Thanks, guys.
Hey, man. Yeah, cool. How do people get in touch with you? How do they find out about Hunter? What's the deal? Tell us.
Well, much to my inbox's chagrin, my email's pretty easy to find. I hear there's a product that it makes that real easy. Look, you can find us at hunter.io. I'm not a frequent commenter on LinkedIn, but I am there, so you can chase me down on LinkedIn. And I try to participate in as many conversations as I can. But look me up there, or you can email me at matt@hunter.io.
And if you want a recording of this episode, check that link that I just dropped in. We do have a dedicated channel for this show. If you subscribe, you'll never miss an episode. Thank you so much, Matt. Next week, we have a new LinkedIn legend, Laura Acosta, who, I mean, she just it's something insane. I don't even know what the numbers are, but she posted for a year and has 200,000 followers. And even more impressively, she's made 40 YouTube videos, and she has 50,000 YouTube followers. So I want to hear, how the hell do you do that? Because
and just to add another 50,000 on Instagram, she's just,
it's bananas.
Crazy. It's hard enough.
I don't even understand it. Yeah, I don't even understand it. So that's what we're going to demystify next week on Unfuck My Startup. So thanks everybody for coming, and we'll talk to you next week.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.